G'day guys, welcome back to another episode of Adventure News. Kawasaki is bringing the KLX300 to Australian shores. Finally, Yamaha is releasing an updated WR125R that's coming to Europe and potentially North America, and fingers crossed maybe one day Australia as well. And does that mean that a 250R is on the horizon? We'll talk about that later. I also want to talk about one of the owners of Bajaj talking about the future of KTM's production in Europe, and things are not looking good. And lastly, I've got a brand new motorcycle. So let's just jump into all this great news right now. If you're new here, welcome to Chronicles of Solid. I cover everything to do with adventure and dual sport motorcycles, whether it be news, reviews, or long-term tests where I put bikes head to head to see which one's best for you. Also, if you want some merchandise, my merchandise is now live, so get yourself a trucker hat like this, a mug, a hoodie, a t-shirt, whatever it is. Grab yourself some merch and help out the channel. That would be fantastic as well. And here's some big news for the channel. I've just bought myself a 2013 F800 GS to put head to head with my Himalayan 450 to really find out what's the better way to go. A brand new small adventure bike or getting a second-hand middleweight for exactly the same price. Back to the main event though. Let's get down to the nitty-gritty of the news for September. The first one we need to talk about is KTM. This is on the tinfoil hat spectrum of if, buts, and maybes. There's nothing confirmed here, but if we extrapolate out what has been said, it does spell dark days for KTM in Europe. One of the big questions I had, and one of the questions a lot of you had that you sent to me, was Solid, now that Bajaj has come in and rescued KTM from the brink of death, what is going to happen with KTM Europe? Because obviously Bajaj is Indian based. They're a massive motorcycle company in India. And wouldn't the temptation from Bajaj be to save costs and either move production over to India where they're based, or move it to another country where building motorcycles is more financially responsible? They made this big fuss of reopening KTM in Austria and that they were back and everything was hunky-dory. But my long tail question really was, how long is this going to last? How long will KTM stay in Austria? Now I'm going to probably butcher this name, but Rajiv Bajaj, so it's in his name, Bajaj, so you know he's at the very top and knows what he's talking about with the direction that Bajaj is going to go with KTM. Here's what he said about KTM and production in Europe.
The second thing we have to do is to reset the cost. To put it very simply and bluntly, European manufacturing is dead. Every single Triumph motorcycle that is made today is made either in Thailand and of course more recently in India. If Triumph can do this 15 years back, in principle, why not KTM?
Production in Europe is dead. Now, to be fair, he didn't specifically said production of KTM's, Husqvarna's and Gas is dead within Austria, so it wasn't specific. But I think a generalized statement like production of motorcycles in Europe is dead pretty much shows the writing on the wall that at least in the long term, Bajaj will be moving KTM's production somewhere else. Where that is, I don't know, because to move it to India, that's a lot of R&D. They would really have to upgrade their facilities as well as take a lot of that knowledge and that know-how over to India. They basically have to ship the whole production facility, or at least build a whole new one, because India's Bajaj facilities, while they are great, they certainly don't know their way around a race-bred enduro bike or a huge behemoth super adventure like the 1290, for instance. Maybe they could move somewhere like Thailand where they've got more experience building performance-based motorcycles for plenty of other manufacturers, or maybe they will reopen the books with CF Moto with some agreement there. We don't really know. But the writing certainly is in the wall, at least to me, from that statement, that Bajaj have no intention of staying long-term in Europe with KTM, specifically Austria. So I think that's a sad comment to hear. I'm disappointed to hear it, but at the same time, it makes economic sense because it's very expensive making motorcycles in countries that aren't dirt cheap. So it's just pure logic. If you're trying to make money and that's your end goal, and you've just bought this company that's almost crapped the bed financially, your next move is to try and shore up those financial leaks And one of those things would be to save massively on production costs, wages, and all the things that go around making a motorcycle. And that unfortunately means leaving the more expensive area of Europe to produce your motorcycles and potentially moving to greener pastures. So I'd love to know your thoughts on everything KTM and Bajaj Auto. Big news from Yamaha in their small dual sport world. No, unfortunately, not an updated WR250R or 350R. But this is a shine of hope that I'm trying not to get too excited about. So in Europe, it's just been announced they're reintroducing a refreshed WR125R, which I think is pretty cool and exciting. If there's one thing to be said about these super small little dual sports, they're great as entry-level motorcycles. Think of them as a gateway drug to the off-road world. So they definitely have their place, and I have a lot of love for them. And Yamaha's refreshed and reintroduced the WR125R to the European market and potentially the North American market. And fingers crossed, here in Australia as well, but Yamaha have made no mention of that. It's only Europe for now. But let's talk about the specifications first. So we're looking at 125 cc's, 14.5 to 15 horsepower, depending which article you read, and about 11.3 staggering Newton meters of torque. So she's not gonna rip your arms off under acceleration, but that's not the point of this bike. Suspension travel's pretty good as well. You've got 215 millimeters up front, roughly 8.5 inches, 187 millimeters out the back, or 7.5 inches thereabouts. Importantly, 21/18 spoke wheel setup. And it now has a 6-speed gearbox instead of a 5-speed gearbox. Suzuki, if you're watching, Yamaha can do it on their little piddler. I'm not sure why you couldn't do it on the DRZ4S. Now, seat height is a little tall at 875 millimeters. It's not the tallest. That translates to about 34.5 inches. But for these entry-level bikes, it's not going to be the most approachable either. It's got front-only ABS. Now, it is also on the porkier end of the spectrum at 138 kilos. Now, that is comparable to other bikes like the KLX300S. But for a 125, it's lacking pretty much half the displacement of the 230 and still weighs the same. So it'll be interesting whether that weight and the tall seat height will keep people away. Fuel capacity is also 8 liters, so range should be pretty good because this little thing sips fuel. So extrapolating that out, if Yamaha are to be believed, from an 8-liter tank, you're going to be able to do 320 kilometers, or roughly 200 miles, which is pretty astonishing. I think it's great to see a refreshed WR125R and another option for those people really just starting out wanting to get something super approachable and value orientated. Now, I know what you're thinking. Solid, does this give us hope for the WR250R? If Yamaha are refreshing some of their dual sports, does that mean there's life in the dual sport department now? Look, hold your horses. I think, to put it simply, if you're hanging on by a thread, hoping that Yamaha is going to be bringing out a dual sport and you're about to jump off the cliff, I'd wait a little bit longer, because this is a small sign of life, a tiny shred of hope. Because if they have refreshed this little WR125R, maybe that means they will then shift focus and realize, hey, we've got a big hole in our lineup where the 250R used to be. Honda and Kawasaki seem to be doing amazing with their 300L and the KLX300. Maybe we should look at it. But I think this is a positive sign that at least their side of the dual sport world is showing signs of a little bit of life, because before this, it was terminally ill, if not dead. Now, at least back on life support, and there's a little bit of hope. So come on, Yamaha, do the right thing. Make an updated WR250R, 300, 350R, whatever it is. Just get on it, because the world wants to see it.
Start it up.
The KLX300 is officially here in Australia. It just kind of happened. Kawasaki didn't announce anything. It caught us all by surprise. But the best thing about this story is Australia, maybe as some beautiful karma, we get a very special KLX300 in Australia that the rest of the world does not get. And what is that? We get better suspension. We've got more travel than the North American KLX300. I have to give a shout out to Rob, who emailed this through, put together this fantastic looking spreadsheet. Rob, big thanks, mate, and hope you're out there enjoying the trails. So instead of 254 millimeters of travel up the front for the North American model, we're getting 285 millimeters of travel. And instead of 231 millimeters of travel at the back, we are getting 289 millimeters of travel. So that's a decent 30 mil extra up front, and that's a staggering 50 mil extra on the rear. And that obviously translates to more clearance as well for the Australian spec'd model. In the US, it's 274 millimeters or 10.8 inches. Here in Australia, 315 millimeters, so you've got way more clearance as well. Now, obviously that means the seat height is also going to be much taller than the North American model. So the Australian model is 935 millimeters. That's quite tall. That's 5 millimeters more than my WR125R. If you're a shorter rider, that's going to be a massive disappointment. That extra travel and that taller seat height is probably going to be a no-go. So unfortunately, that's a bit of a downer. But I think for most of us, it's going to be pretty exciting because that potentially means this suspension is going to be better off-road than the North American model as well. As far as I can tell, that is the only difference. It still makes 26 horsepower and 24 Newton meters of torque. Same 2118 wheel setup. Everything else is identical. For those of you outside of Australia saying, why, oh why does Australia get some special KLX300 with better suspension? So we have some funny and strange laws here in Australia. Just like everywhere else in the world, we have our quirks. So a bike needs to be ADR compliant, Australian Design Regulations. And one of those regulations is you need ABS to sell a motorcycle here in Australia if it is going to be a road motorcycle. But one of the loopholes here is enduro motorcycles here in Australia don't require ABS, but we can still ride them on the road. So a lot of bikes that you don't get with a license plate in North America or somewhere else, all those enduro style motorcycles, we get a license plate straight out of the gate. And they don't need ABS because ADR says if it's an enduro bike, it doesn't need that. And an enduro bike in our laws here needs a certain amount of suspension travel, and it's not allowed to have any accommodations to carry a pillion. So no pillion pegs and all that business. So what Kawasaki have done is done exactly what Suzuki did for the DRZ 400E that I bought back in 2021. Suzuki was able to keep selling the E model here because it passed the enduro regulations because it had enough suspension travel. They removed the pillion pegs, and that meant it was classed as an enduro and could be sold. So Kawasaki obviously figured that out. What they've done is the Australian model, the pillion pegs have been removed, so it isn't legally allowed to carry a passenger, and the suspension travel has been bumped up to pass the Australian Design Regulation stipulations to class it as an enduro motorcycle rather than a road-based motorcycle like the CRF 300L has been registered as. Thank God for that loophole. It means we get an absolute cult classic of a little 300 dual sport here in Australia. I was gutted when I found out it wasn't coming here in 2021. For long years I've been waiting, and boy is it good to see it on our shores. I'm really excited to test this bike out and see what it's like. That'll be really interesting to see. All around, just fantastic news that Team Green have brought in the KLX300 to Australia, and the icing on the cake, the big apology from Kawasaki is that you get more suspension travel than the rest of the world. So double thumbs up, Kawasaki. Welcome to Australia. I'd love to know your thoughts. Are you interested? Are you going to be going and getting one yourself? Or are you unfortunately a little bit too short for this long-legged model? Chuck your thoughts down below. And that's it for this episode of Adventure News. If you made it to the end, thanks for watching. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe. And as always, guys, don't forget to stay shiny side up, and I'll see you in the next one. Catch you later.